Hello and welcome once again to Yesterday's Airlines, where we're going to take a look at the latest release announcements. And in this video we're going to be ranking the JC Wings April announcements, of which there are 17. So it's a reasonable size month for JC, but the trend for this month is very similar to the trend from previous months. And that trend is one where the majority of the announcements are for future models which JC haven't even got the artwork prepared for yet, let alone the models near production. So these models could take quite a while to get out there, and that is one of the big frustrations, probably the big frustration with JC Wings, is that it just takes them ages to get a lot of the models they announce out into the market. So this is very similar to the rest of this year, the earlier months, and I get the feeling it's just because JC have whittled down the backlog in their warehouse and now they're having to produce new things, but it's just taken them a bit of time to get that going. So that's a little disappointing. And to be honest, a lot of the choices here aren't exactly particularly exciting either. And I had said earlier in the year that I had high hopes for JC Wings release output, and so far they haven't really necessarily hit those high points, but I'm still pretty sure that there's going to be some really good stuff coming up in 2025. So it pays to keep watching what JC are up to. And I have to say that I have bought some JC Wings models this year. I've got the Lion Air MD90 on the way, and also Garuda CRJ1000. So there are some JC Wings models that are getting out there and will be gracing my collection. Also the McDonnell Douglas MD80 with the UDF fans as well. There are some great releases still being made by JC. This month we've only got 4 models, which are models that are in the near category, and the rest of the models are very much down the line future releases. So we'll look at them in that order. Before we do that, don't forget to chuck a like on this video if you're enjoying the content. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much to everyone that does, and I really appreciate that. I release a lot of this sort of content, so make sure you subscribe to not miss out on the latest release rankings and other cool stuff as well. Check me out at Instagram and Facebook and yesterdaysairlines.com, obviously the website. Now, before we get into the rankings, it is time for me to tell you about Northeast Diecast, who are sponsoring this video. Now, Northeast Diecast is run by a great guy called Matthew, and as the name suggests, they are in the northeast of the United States. He specializes in collection sales, and he's got a really impressive range of nearly 300 400 scale models up on his site at the moment, and there's some really cool and rare material there. So it's definitely worth checking out what he's got up for sale. He's been decreasing his prices, so that is great, and you get a 15% discount on top of the existing discounts on the site using Yesterday's Airlines 15 code. So don't forget to include that code when you're buying models from Northeast Diecast. I myself have been using the code and buying models from Northeast Diecast. I've got 6 that are arrived recently or are on the way. So there's some really great models at the site, and I have to say I'm really impressed by the effort he goes into to make sure the packing of the models is great for transit. I've never actually received models that are so well packed before. So really great experience so far with Northeast Diecast from me. I'm really liking the models that they've got up for sale, and as I say, you get a 15% discount if you use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15. And considering the price of new models is going up, thanks to Trump's tariffs, then it's a good time to look at older releases that are for sale at places like Northeast Diecast. So do check that out and use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15. Okay, so let's get in and look at the release announcements for JC this month. We start off, as I said, with just 4 models. The first of which is an A300 ST, the big Beluga transport that Airbus was using before they got their Beluga XLs. JC Wings is the only one with a mould really active for this at the moment, though I believe that there is some other mould on the market from postage stamp models, but that'll be rubbish in comparison. Not really a model to get too excited about. I would focus very much on this one. It's a great looking mould. It's just a shame they're not really using it for particularly exciting liveries. This is the 5th release from JC Wings, and they've basically released thus far, Belugas 1, 2, 3, and this is Beluga 4. And they released Beluga 5, which was wearing a special scheme just a few months back. So they're gradually pushing through these schemes, but the schemes are just the standard Airbus colours and the modern Airbus colours, not the more interesting previous colours. So I'd like to see the more classic Beluga livery myself. This is an interactive model, and the interactive features of this model look pretty damn good. So absolutely no reason to not think this is going to be a great model, and as you can see from the pictures, it's looking really nice. But it is fundamentally the same as 3 of the previous 4 releases that JC have made on the mould, except that this is aircraft number 4. So I'm just going to put this one into workhorse, despite the fact it looks pretty good. Next up, we've got a 737-700 in house colours scheme, N1791 Bravo. Now, I have to say that it's not quite the house colours scheme, because it actually is wearing a very attractive special scheme of the house colour scheme, which has the whole building on success livery for it. And it's a really attractive scheme and looks great on the aircraft. And I would be all over this release as a model that definitely should be joining my collection, except for the mould that it's on. I can't say I'm a big fan of the JC Wings 737-700. I've shown these images before because I own this model. It's Cunning Airlines. This is a JC73G, and you can see that the mould is just a bit clunky, much like their 800, to be quite honest. It's not a great mould at all. I don't know. I might still get this, but I'm not loving the mould. And certainly, when you look at, for example, the Boeing house colours that was made not long ago by Panda, different Boeing house colours, but nonetheless same kind of feeling, you can see how much better the Panda mould is and how much better it wears it. And if Panda were making this, I'd be super excited, but because it's the JC Wings one and this mould is a bit, I'm not really overly excited. So I think I'm just going to put this one into workhorse as well. I usually, to be honest, gas guzzle this mould, but yeah, I think I'll put it into workhorse because I really quite excited by the scheme, even if I really don't like the actual mould. Next up, we've got a Qatar Airways 747-8 freighter, A7 Bravo Golf Alpha is the registration for this one, and this one again is an interactive model. I really like the interactive 747-8. I just think interactive models are pretty cool, and they do look really good. Actually, the only other Qatar 747-8 that's been made before was BGB, and that was made by Gemini in 2018 on not the interactive mold, the other mold. So this one is actually surprisingly quite unique in the scale. It hasn't been made before, and I like the mold quite a lot. I've got a few of these, including this Cathay version you can see on screen, and I think they're really good. So I'm going to put this one up in the high flyer, even though it's Qatar Airways, and as you know, I'm not an enormous fan. It's still going to be a pretty cool model. Model number 4, and the last of the, at least in theory, to come out soon models, is an Icelandair 757-300, TFFIX. And if you're getting deja vu here, then it's because I've already discussed this model, but I discussed it back in November, or at least a very similar model. It's a little confusing because they've already announced this registration and this livery of 757-300. I can't decide or work out why they're announcing it again. The part numbers are slightly different. I just don't understand it. Yeah, it's strange. Not really sure what's going on there. The mold for the 757-300, yeah, it's fine. It's nowhere near as good as the NG version, let's be honest, but it is perfectly reasonable. And the versions that Gemini have been releasing, like this Delta example, for example, here, look good and look nice. Better actually than the Series 200, I think. So this should be good. But yeah, is it the same as the previous one? I'm just going to put it in the workhorse because I can't be bothered to overthink it. But I swear it's exactly the same as the model that they announced in November. Funny that. Okay, and that ends the models which, at least in theory, should be coming out relatively soon. Only 2 of these have got actual photos, so only 2 of them are going to be released in the next couple of months. But presumably the 73G and the 757 are at least at the artwork stage, judging by the pictures here. The rest of the models are models which don't have anything to represent themselves aside from photos of the actual aircraft. And that kind of means I don't want to spend too much time going over them individually. A, you don't know exactly what they're going to look like when they're done, and B, you've no idea when the things are going to actually get released, but it could easily be more than a year with JC Wings release output. But we'll go through each of them and have a quick look and see what I do think. Starting off, we've got an Air India A310-300. We don't get many A310s, and there's a good reason for that. That's because the molds aren't very good, at least the molds from JC Gemini. Gemini did produce a Emirates version not that many moons ago, and it used the old Gemini mold. So it's not as bad as the JetX A300 or JetX A310, but it's still not particularly good. I've had a few of these in my collection historically, including this Martin Air version, and as you can see, it's got a seam and the engines hang really low. It's nowhere near as good as the Aero Classics A310, and it does really hinder my interest in this Air India version, I have to say. So I'm actually going to put this one down in the gas guzzler. It's an example where JC Wings are using a mold that they should just bin. And where is exactly that sample A310 that they sent me about 3 or 4 years ago that I reviewed? It just vanished. That's really frustrating. I'm pretty sure this one will use the Gemini mold, and it isn't good enough. Just like the JetX mold they're using for those A300s. They shouldn't be using these molds. They're just rubbish. Could you please, not just put out good samples, good, examples of aircraft combos on really poor molds? It's not good. It's not what I want to be seeing from JC Wings, to be honest. Next up, we've got a JetBlue A320. This one is wearing a special scheme. It's a Super Mario Brothers livery here. I've never been a big fan of Super Mario, I have to say, so this one's ranking very close to Pokemon in my head space. It's not as cool as the Disney scheme that was released on the Alaska recently by NG, and it's certainly not as cool as Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck, for example. I don't really like Super Mario that much, no affinity with this, and to be honest, this scheme looks kind of crap. So I'm not a big fan of this one. I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse. Next up, we've got an A321. This one is Lufthansa. This one's it's a Neo, and it's wearing quite an interesting scheme called Help Alliance, and it's got what look like lots of flowers on the fuselage. It looks like it should be an attractive livery for this aircraft, which is registered. Actually, I'm not sure what it's registered, to be quite honest. Let me look up and see what it is registered. It's registered DAI Echo Papa. So I like the scheme here. No one else has announced this livery, and that gives this a level of uniqueness, but unfortunately one which is tempered very much, very, very much by the poor nature of the Neo mold, which is being used here by JC Gemini. So I tend to gas guzzle this mold, and I don't see any reason not to do that here as well, unfortunately. And you kind of hope, if you're a Lufthansa collector, that NG will get to this one at some point, and they probably will. Next up, we've got a Spanish Air Force A330 MRTT, though not seemingly one which has got all the MRTT add-ons to it, but it's got some. The reg is TK.24-03. The scheme isn't especially attractive, you've got to say. It's just a kind of all-over grey with door outlines. It's not very interesting. And the A330 mold from JC is also not particularly spectacular. Having said that, this still should be quite an interesting model, but it's not one which is floating my boat dramatically, even for someone who's recently got more into military aircraft. So I think I'll put this one into Workhorse as well. Last Airbus is a Swiss Airbus A350-900, and this one's got this really cool livery on it, which is called Wanderlust, or Wanderlust, really, if I don't have a silly accent. And got to say, it's a pretty exciting livery. Lots of interesting things being added to the pretty boring standard scheme that Swiss generally has. The livery itself is generally a celebrating Swiss culture scheme. This model has also been announced by Aviation 400 very recently, and it's bound to get some other releases too. And you go back again to the fact that the Gemini JC Wings A350 is not a wheel beater by any means. So with those things added on, plus the long time scales, it's just another candidate for workhorse in my view. That takes us out of the Airbuses and into the future Boeings. And here things are a little bit more interesting, I think. First up, we've got an Air Pacific 747-400, which is quite a cool classic release for JC Wings. And the reg of the aircraft is DQ Foxtrot Juliet Kilo. It's not the first time that this has been made in 400 scale. In fact, I already own the Witty Wings version from 2012, which is registered Foxtrot Juliet Lima, so it's a sister ship of this one. But it is going to be on the newish, it's not new anymore, is it? It's about 5 or 6 years old, but the current modern JC Wing 747-400 mold, which is a really good mold. It's probably not good enough that I'm going to replace the existing Witty Wings version I have, to be honest, which I really do like, and is also a seamless mold. But it should be really good, and that does elevate this one somewhat. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sold on the JC 747-400, mainly because of the undercarriage. It's a little bit low. I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. I think this is a good, solid, classic style release. Hasn't been released for a long time, and it's also will come in flaps up and down configuration too. The next Boeing is also a pretty cool one. It is a Delta. In fact, it is the spirit of Delta. So obviously a very famous and well-known 767-200, and one which I think a lot of people will appreciate. But again, it is a case of JC Wings releasing the aircraft on quite an old mould. A mould, well, I say quite an old mould, a very old mould. And there has been previous versions of N102DA, which is this aircraft, and in this livery. So it's not the first time that it's ever been made by any means. In fact, it was made in 2006 by Gemini on this exact same mould. And it is a seamed mould. I have to say, this one's going to have aerials, rolling gear and such, and it probably will be really good. But the mould does have limitations. If this was on the Panda Models mould, I think this would be a much, much better model. It's on the very old Gemini mould. It's going to be a less impressive model, though one that is still quite nice. So, again, I think I'll put this one in the high flyer, but it's not completely hitting the mark because of the age of the mould. We've got 6 more models still to discuss, and 4 of those are Boeing releases. First one is a 777-200ER in colours Austrian Airlines, but wearing a special scheme which celebrates Johann Strauss, and it's registered OE Lima Papa Foxtrots. I can't say I really love this current Austrian scheme. The white engines and the kind of tail area, it's not as good as previous Austrian liveries, I have to say. And there have been releases of 777s wearing this livery by Phoenix in 2024, so it's not the first time this has been released in a sense, but this Johann Strauss version has never been released before, and I have to say that I do prefer the JC Wings 777 over the Phoenix. So I think this will be a really nice model when it ever gets into the marketplace, and I'm willing to put this one up into high flyer. Model number 13 is another 777, but this time round it's a Series 300 ER, and it's registered BKP Foxtrot. If that seems familiar, it's because it's the aircraft that wore the Asia's World City scheme, and it has been made quite a few times previously. In fact, it's even been made by JC Wings relatively recently in 2019. I actually own one of those versions. So it has been made before by JC on exactly the same mold as going to be released here. This is effectively a complete re-release. It was also remade in 2022 by Aviation 400. So, decent model. It will look lovely, but it is effectively a re-release, and therefore it's a workhorse, isn't it? That one incidentally comes in flaps up and flaps down, and I believe also that the Johann Strauss Austrian does come up in flaps up and down too. Now, the next two models also come in flaps up and down, and these two are so obvious that it's almost pointless to discuss them. They are both Korean Air wearing new colours. The first one's a 777-300ER HL8008, and the other one is a 787-10 Dreamliner HL8515. Now, I don't like this Korean livery, and in fact, I don't think I'm alone in not liking it. It's really boring. It could be worse. It's still not shocking, but when you look at what Korean had beforehand, it's just nowhere near as good, is it? Let's be honest. Outside of the livery, nobody else has announced these yet, but of course they will get made. They're going to get made by Phoenix. They'll probably get made by NG Models. It's inevitable. And they almost certainly will get made by Aviation 400 as well. So there's not much point in putting your money in the JC Wings basket at this point, because you know that as these are future models, it's going to be at least a year, maybe longer, before they get made, and there's going to be several other options by that time. So I would definitely wait if I were you. I'm going to put both these in workhorse because of that reason. It's great that JC are going to make them, but when are they going to make them? Who knows when these are going to come out, and there's going to be plenty of competition. And the livery sucks. So I'm just going to workhorse that pair. That leaves us two models to discuss, neither of which are Airbus or Boeing. First one up is a Czech Airlines CSA ATR 72. OK, Golf Foxtrot Romeo is the reg. This one's wearing the SkyTeam livery, so that's quite cool. I'm surprised, looking at the database, how few Czech airline releases there have been. Obviously CSA no longer technically exists, which is a damn shame. But there haven't been that many CSA releases anyway. This one, again, should be really good because they've got an excellent little ATR mould, and at least it is quite interesting and unique. So this one, I think, definitely deserves of a high flyer. And that leaves our last model as a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, and in this case it is Alitalia, and the reg is I Delta Uniform Papa Delta. This is another case, in a sense, of a spoiler release, because Panda models have obviously got a vastly superior MD-11 mold that they have produced, and it's very recent, and it's got all modern features, and it's really well crafted. Whereas JC Wings have got a very old MD-11 that they've updated, which is still perfectly okay, but nowhere near as good as the Panda version. So once again, much like when you look through several models in this list, the mold is pretty mediocre, and the subject matter is really good. So it depends how you feel about that, as to whether you get it. I have no idea if anyone else is ever going to make this. Actually, I can't say. They really may or may not. I'm going to put it in workhorse because of those reasons. I think it's a great choice, and I'd like to get an Alitalia MD-11, but I'm not going to buy this one because of the mold. Okay, now that's a quick look around the 17 models which JC Wings have announced for this April. And obviously, as I said, I think at least 6 of them will come up in flaps up and flaps down versions. What do I make of this set? Well, it's hard to make a lot when you don't really know when the models are going to come out. I would say that a good chunk of these models are on disappointing molds, which damage their interest to me. The 737-700, the 757-300, the A310s, the A320s, the A321. In fact, almost all of them are on pretty ordinary molds. The only ones that really aren't is the Beluga, the 777s, the 787s, and the ATR. Everyone, and 747, I guess. Everyone else here, at least half of the set, are on molds which really should probably be retired and replaced with better versions, or there are better versions of other manufacturers. NG's got a better 757, Aeroclassic's got a better A310, almost everyone's got a better A321neo. and so on and so forth. So that is a little disappointing, and I would like JC Wings to focus on molds which are of high quality rather than necessarily releasing things willy-nilly regardless of the quality of the mold that they're using. But at the same time, there's some good diversity here, and if these models were coming out sooner than they're likely to, then some of them will probably be getting better scores. Okay guys, well hopefully you've enjoyed this trip through the JC Wings April announcements. It will be interesting to see in the coming months how 400 scale is impacted by the insane tariffs that are being put on products from China in the United States. I think it will have a big impact if those tariffs stay around. Big impact on retailers and a big impact potentially on several of the major brands, but possibly not JC Wings that much since they don't make a dramatic amount of US material. Anyway, that is it for this month, so thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video here at the channel. Goodbye for now.